I was standing in my own kitchen when my son's wife looked me in the eye and said, "This house is going to be ours someday anyway. You should just sign it over now and save everyone the trouble." I remember the exact moment. It was the Sunday before Thanksgiving. I had spent the morning making my mother's pecan pie from scratch, the one with the dark Caro syrup and just a pinch of sea salt that she always said was the secret. The whole house smelled like butter and warm sugar. My grandson was sitting at the kitchen table with a crayon in his fist, drawing something he kept calling a fire dragon. And she said that, just like that, like she was asking me to pass the salt. I didn't say a word. I just turned back to the stove and stirred the cranberry sauce and thought, "You have no idea what you just started." My name is Lorraine. Wait, no. Let me start over. My friends call me Ginny, short for Virginia, though my late husband always said the name was too fancy for someone who kept her rain boots by the front door year-round. His name was Robert. He passed 4 years ago, a heart attack sudden in the driveway on a Tuesday morning in March. One of those things you never see coming and never fully get over. We'd been married 31 years. We built this house together. We picked the lot, argued over the kitchen layout, compromised on the color of the shutters. He wanted navy. I wanted forest green. We went with navy. I've never regretted letting him win that one. After Robert died, my son, I'll call him my son because that's what he is, whatever else has happened between us, he and his wife moved back to town. They said it was to be closer to me. They said they were worried. My son genuinely was, I believe that. He called every day that first year. He came over on Sundays to mow the lawn without being asked. He'd sit with me on the back porch while I drank my decaf and watched the Cardinals. And sometimes we didn't even talk, and that was okay. That was more than okay. His wife was a different story from the beginning, though I tried not to see it. Her name is, I'm going to call her by what she is because names don't matter as much as patterns, and the pattern was clear. She is the kind of woman who keeps score. Every favor is a debt. Every kindness is a transaction. She smiled at family dinners and hugged me for pictures and called me Mom in front of others. But alone, she had a way of looking at me that I can only describe as calculating. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. Grief does strange things to your perception. I was lonely. I was reading too much into sideways glances. 6 months after they moved back, they mentioned they were having trouble with their apartment lease. The landlord was selling the building. They had 30 days. I had 4 bedrooms and a paid-off house and no one to fill them, so I said what any mother would say, "Come stay with me, just until you find something, just temporarily." That was 2.5 years ago. The temporary became permanent in the way that quiet things do, gradually, then all at once. My son's wife started rearranging the kitchen. I came home one afternoon from my book club and found that she'd moved everything I owned into new cabinets to make more space. The coffee mugs Robert and I had collected on every vacation we'd ever taken, the ones from Cape Cod and Asheville, and that little shop in Door County, Wisconsin, were in a box in the garage. She said they were cluttering the shelves. I brought them back inside. I didn't say anything. I just put them back. She said, smiling, "Oh, I thought you'd want to simplify." I said, "I'm 63 years old. I get to decide what I simplify." She laughed like I was joking. I was not joking. Things escalated the way they always do in these situations, so slowly that you keep convincing yourself you're overreacting. She started talking about the house as though it were already hers. She'd say things to her friends on the phone like, "We've been redoing the landscaping at our place," or "We're thinking of finishing the basement." I heard her once. She didn't know I was in the hallway. My son didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he noticed and didn't want to deal with it. I know my son. He has always been a peacekeeper. Even as a boy, he'd diffuse arguments between his sister and me with a joke or a subject change. He was never built for confrontation. And she knew that. I think she counted on it. The grandchildren, I have 2, A boy of 8 and a girl who just turned 6 were the great joy of all of it. Whatever else was happening between the adults, those 2 children made every Sunday morning worth waking up for. My grandson started teaching himself chess from a library book and wanted to show me every new thing he learned. My granddaughter had recently decided she wanted to be a marine biologist, which she pronounced marine, with total confidence, and I was not going to correct her for anything in the world. I started setting aside money for them. Not a huge amount all at once, but consistently every month into a UTMA account I'd opened at my local credit union. I talked to a financial advisor about eventually moving it into proper education trusts when the amounts got significant enough. My plan was to make sure that whatever happened in life, whatever job my son had, whatever the economy did, whatever, those kids would have something waiting for them. A foundation, the kind my parents gave me, and Robert's parents gave him, and that we'd always intended to pass forward. My son knew about the accounts. He thought it was generous. His wife found out about them around 18 months ago, and that's when the temperature in the house changed in a way that was no longer subtle. She started asking questions. Casual at first, how much was in there? How did they work? When could the kids access the money? I answered honestly because I had nothing to hide. They were custodial accounts. The children were the beneficiaries. The money was theirs when they came of age. She then asked, and this is the part I still think about, she asked whether she and my son could be listed as co-custodians. I said I'd think about it. She pushed. She said it was only fair, as the children's parents. She said it was actually legally appropriate. She'd looked it up. She said she just wanted to make sure the money was managed correctly. I told her I had a financial advisor for that. She stopped smiling. From that point on, things moved faster. She started finding reasons to keep the children away from me. Playdates that conflicted with our Sunday mornings. Sleepovers at friends' houses. A suddenly packed schedule that always seemed to materialize whenever I mentioned wanting to spend time with the kids. My son would apologize quietly and say it was just a busy stretch. It was never just a busy stretch. It was never just a busy stretch. Then one evening in September, my son came to me alone. He sat at the kitchen table, at Robert's old chair, at the table where we'd eaten 10,000 family dinners, and he looked at his hands and said, "Mom, she thinks you're using the accounts to control us." I sat down across from him. I said, "Do you think that?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know what to think anymore." That was the night I understood that I was not going to be able to reason my way through this, not with her, and maybe not even with him. Not right now. He was caught between 2 people he loved, and she had gotten there first. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed that Robert and I had shared for 30 years, and I looked at the ceiling, and I thought about what it meant to love someone, to really love them, not the performing of it, not the keeping score of it, but the actual thing. And I thought about those 2 children asleep down the hall, growing up in a house where the adults were running a cold war over their heads, and I made a decision. I called my financial advisor first thing the next morning. I also called a real estate attorney. I'd been meaning to for months and kept putting it off the way you put things off when you're hoping you won't need them. Here is what I did, and I want to be clear, I did not do any of it out of spite. I did it because I finally understood that good intentions without structure leave everyone vulnerable. I had the house transferred into a irrevocable living trust with me as trustee. This meant the house was still mine in every meaningful sense. I controlled it completely. I lived in it. Nothing changed day to day, but it was no longer in my personal name in a way that made it easily contestable or accessible if my circumstances changed. My attorney walked me through the whole thing. It took about 6 weeks to finalize. For the children's accounts, I worked with my financial advisor to restructure them as formal education trusts. I remained the trustee. The funds could only be used for qualified education expenses. No one, not my son, not his wife, not anyone else, had access to or authority over those funds except through me, and eventually through the terms of the trust itself when the children came of age. I didn't announce any of this. I went about my life. I made dinner. I watched the Cardinals. I kept the rain boots by the front door. Then came Thanksgiving. I had cooked for 2 days. The table was set with the good dishes, the ones with the blue willow pattern that were a wedding gift, that I had washed by hand for 31 years because Robert was always afraid the dishwasher would chip them. My daughter had driven up from Columbus with her husband and their teenage son. My son and his family were already in the house, of course. It should have been a good day. For a few hours it was. But after dinner, when the kids were in the other room watching a movie and the adults were lingering over coffee and pie, my son's wife brought it up again. She said she'd been talking to someone, a friend of hers, a paralegal, and she'd learned that as the children's parents, she and my son had certain rights regarding assets held for the children's benefit. She looked at me from across the table. She said, "We think you should transfer the accounts into our names. The kids are our children. We should be managing their money." My daughter looked at me. My son looked at his coffee cup. I cut a small piece of pie. I took a bite. It was good. My mother's recipe has never failed me. I said, "That's not going to happen." She said, "We've already talked to someone. We know our rights." I said, "Then you'll know that the accounts are now structured as irrevocable education trusts, and neither you nor my son have authority over them, and that's not going to change." The table was very quiet. She said, "You did what?" I said, "I had them restructured about 6 weeks ago. The children are still the beneficiaries. The money is still for them, but no one else has access." She looked at my son. He hadn't known. She said, "You can't do that." I said, "I did do that, and I'd like more pie if someone would pass it." My daughter passed me the pie. What happened over the next few weeks was not quiet. She was furious. She told my son I had gone behind their backs. She said I was controlling and manipulative. She said I had no right to make financial decisions about money meant for their children without involving them. My son came to me the next day. He was upset. He said he felt blindsided. I understood that, and I told him so. I told him I was sorry he found out at the table, that I should have told him privately, and I meant that. That part I regret. But I also told him the truth. I said, "Your wife has been systematically trying to gain access to money that belongs to your children, not to her. She's been using the children as leverage to limit my relationship with them when I wouldn't cooperate. I love you. I love those kids, and I'm not going to apologize for protecting them." He didn't say anything. He left and went back upstairs. I sat in the kitchen for a long time that evening. Just me and the quiet and the mugs from Cape Cod and Asheville and Door County back where they belonged. The following weeks were hard. I won't sugarcoat it. My son stopped coming to sit with me in the mornings. The children's schedule got even more restricted. There were days when the house felt like a cold and unfamiliar place, even though it was mine, even though every corner of it held a memory of Robert and of raising my kids and of the life I had actually lived. But something was different this time, and it took me a while to name it. What was different was that I had stopped waiting for permission. I had stopped hoping she would suddenly become someone other than who she was. I had stopped measuring my worth against whether she was willing to acknowledge it. I had a hard conversation with my son in early December, a real one. Just the two of us, at the kitchen table, after she had taken the kids to her mother's for the weekend. I made us both decaf and I said everything I'd been holding for 2 years. Not in anger. I was past the anger by then. But clearly and honestly, and without any exit left for either of us to take. I told him that I knew he was in a difficult position. I told him that I loved him and that nothing would change that. I told him that I had spent his whole childhood trying to make sure he knew he was loved unconditionally, and I needed him to understand that I meant that now too. But that unconditional love does not mean I accept being treated as a resource to be managed. I told him about the Thanksgiving comment, about the mugs, about the phone call I'd overheard, about the paralegal she'd apparently consulted. I laid it all out. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "I didn't know she talked to a paralegal." I said, "There's a lot you don't know because you've been choosing not to know it." He looked up at me. I think that landed. He didn't defend her. He also didn't apologize on her behalf. What he said was, "I need some time to think." I said, "Take the time." He did. He took about 3 weeks of it. Those were 3 quiet and honestly somewhat peaceful weeks for me. Strangely enough, I started going back to my water aerobics class at the Y. I had lunch with my friend, the one I'd been cancelling on for months, because the house dynamics had made me too exhausted to be social. I sat on the back porch in the December cold with my decaf and watched for cardinals and thought about what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. The children found me. That mattered more than anything else that happened. My granddaughter knocked on my bedroom door one afternoon while her parents were having what was clearly a tense conversation in the other room, and she climbed into the chair next to my reading chair, and she said, "Grandma, can we watch a nature show about dolphins?" We watched 2 of them. When my son finally came to talk to me again, it was on a Sunday morning, early, while his wife was still asleep. He sat in Robert's chair. He looked older than I'd ever seen him look. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking. He said he'd had some conversations with his wife that had been very difficult. He said he wasn't sure where things were headed between the 2 of them, but he wanted me to know that he understood now. Really understood why I had done what I did with the trusts. He said he was grateful. It took him something to say that, and I knew it, and I told him so. I also told him, whatever happens between you 2, those children have a grandmother who loves them. That doesn't change. The money doesn't change. The house doesn't change. I am not going anywhere. He nodded. He drank his coffee. We sat for a while in the quiet. I don't know what the future holds. I know that my son's marriage is not in an easy place. I know that his wife is not happy with me, and I have made peace with the fact that she may never be. I know that the house is protected, the trusts are structured, and my grandchildren will have something real waiting for them when they grow up. Not because I could control everything, but because I finally stopped pretending that hoping for the best was the same as providing for it. My daughter called me last week. She said, "Mom, I just want you to know I'm proud of you." I didn't expect that. I cried a little after we hung up. The good kind of crying, the kind that means something has finally been said. I keep Robert's navy shutters. I keep the rain boots by the door. I keep the coffee mugs from every place we ever went together, right there on the open shelf where I can see them every morning. Some things you hold on to, not because you're stuck, but because they are genuinely, irreplaceably yours. I think about that Thanksgiving table a lot. The good dishes, the pecan pie, the moment the room went completely silent after I said, "That's not going to happen." And I reached over and cut myself another slice like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. It wasn't ordinary. It had taken me 2.5 years and a grief I hadn't fully named to get to that moment. What I've come to understand is that nothing that happened was an accident, not the good parts or the painful ones. My daughter-in-law didn't become who she was overnight, and I didn't find my footing overnight either. There's a kind of cause and effect in family life that we don't talk about enough because it's uncomfortable. The more I let things slide, the mugs in the garage, the rearranged kitchen, the quiet takeover of language around our house, the more I signaled that sliding was acceptable. I wasn't being kind, I was being unclear, and unclear kindness has a cost. What finally shifted things wasn't anger. Anger had been there for a long time and hadn't moved anything. What shifted things was deciding to be honest, with myself first, and then with my son. Honest about what I was watching happen. Honest about what I was watching happen. Honest about what I actually wanted for those grandchildren. Honest about the fact that loving someone doesn't require you to make yourself smaller and smaller until there's nothing left to love. The attorney, the trust restructuring, the living trust on the house. None of that was revenge. It was clarity made legal. It was me finally doing the thing I should have done, not out of suspicion, but out of basic good sense, protecting what matters, with the right tools, before a crisis forced my hand. That's something I wish I had understood 20 years earlier, that being thoughtful and being prepared are not the same as being cold. You can love deeply and still think clearly. In fact, the people who love most fiercely are often the ones who plan most carefully, because they understand what's actually at stake. My son had to find his own way through it. That was hard to watch, but I've learned that you cannot do another person's growing for them no matter how much you love them. What you can do is stay honest, stay steady, and stay present, so that when they're ready to look clearly at their own life, you're still there, at the kitchen table with the coffee on. My granddaughter knocked on my door during the worst of it and asked to watch dolphin documentaries. She didn't know she was keeping me grounded. Kids rarely know the things they do for us. That's its own kind of grace. I kept the mugs. I kept the rain boots. I kept showing up. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently, because consistency is what outlasts almost everything else. It's not glamorous. It doesn't make for a good argument. But over time, it's the only thing that actually holds. If I've learned anything from all of it, it's this. Good values without clear thinking leave you exposed, and clear thinking without the backbone to act on it is just worry dressed up as wisdom. You need all three: the heart to care, the mind to plan, and the will to follow through even when it's uncomfortable. I didn't have all three in balance for a long time. I had plenty of heart. The rest took longer. I'm glad I finally caught up.